Welcome to our Bengal Club Library virtual talk tonight. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my good friend and colleague on the library subcommittee, Ashok Mukhopadhyay, who will be delivering the talk. There will be a question and answer session after his talk when you can ask questions through the chat box with which I'm sure you're now familiar. You already know about his interests and his books from the mailer. But let me quote a somewhat extended extract from the Hindu's review of his book. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic caught us unawares, there has been a glut of books trying to make sense of the new normal. Most of them are post-facto affairs written with the present contagion in mind. Ashok Mukhopadhyay's Bengali novel, Abhiram Jorer Rupkatha, about 4 generations of doctors from one Bengali family dealing with waves of epidemic in Calcutta from early years of the 20th century till the late 60s. This book was published in January 2018. Its English translation by Orunabh Sinha came out in early April this year when the lockdown had just about started in India. Since it is unrelated to the COVID-19 pandemic, this novel can only be described as prescient. That's why its flat, realistic narrative gives you goosebumps. The patriarch of the Ghoshal family, Dwarikanath, with whom a ballad opens, might remind one of Dr. Ashok Gupta from Ray's Ganashatra. Like Dr. Gupta, Dr. Ghoshal is unbending in his pursuit of knowledge. He scoffs at the quackery that passes off as medical expertise as he goes about his practice at a time when modern medicine was largely viewed with suspicion. When his dearly loved wife dies of the Spanish flu, he dissects her body, scandalizing everyone. All the good doctors in the caste are united in their relentless desire to learn, to question given beliefs, to think, even in the face of inexplicable and deadly diseases. There's an important lesson for us here if we care to listen. And so we shall. Over to you, Ashok.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar. I'm honored to be with you today at the Bengal Club Library Talk. I'm addressing you at a time when for the past 6 months, we have been living in a period of, what should I say, magic realism, in a dark tunnel, the end of which is still not in sight. Interestingly, when I wrote the book some 3 years ago, there was no trace of COVID, no trace of any report of COVID under the sun. But when my publishers, Aleph Book Company, released a ballad of remittent fever on this year, April 10, 2020, our planet is under the spell of fever. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to me. I don't know why did I thought of writing this, but it happened. It is a coincidence. But let me clarify. My book is neither a history of medical sciences, nor is an account of any discoveries of medical sciences. But it's there. It's there. Fragments of history are there, and there are discoveries too. The period of my novel is 1867 to 1967. I use this as backdrop. The history of medical science during this period, the discoveries during this time, I have used this as backdrop. And it is deliberately done just to amplify those characteristics of a human being which are there in the person which are there in the person as like a microorganisms, like atomic droplets. And when any crisis situations happens, and which COVID is, or any, for that matter, any epidemics are, his or her, those characteristics like like despair, like nervousness, like empathy towards other, like fraternal feelings to others, all these things come out on the open. I did this just to show these in a magnified form. And you must be noticing in a crisis situation, people behave very interestingly. To me, I'm using the word interestingly in the sense, normally you may find that a person is modest in nature, well behaved, but when he gets nervous under a crisis situation or under disease condition, he becomes abrasive. Basically, I use this as backdrop just to show that these people or the related people to doctors, they are behaving this kind of manner. Just to study that, just to show that, just to weave that things in a novel. I did this, and it is deliberately done. In fact, epidemics change the lifestyle of human beings. I am sure you all know in the outside world, it impacts the urban planning, architecture, health issues. In the locality, it highlights the superstitions, illogical behavior, irrational attitude, hostility, along with fraternity in the social fabric. While at home, it is a time for acid test for mutual relationships. It happens everywhere in the world, and Calcutta is no exception. In 1867 to 1967, Calcutta experienced more than one epidemic, of which plague, Asiatic cholera, malarial fever, smallpox are noteworthy. Besides, tuberculosis, typhus, Spanish flu also struck the population. Plague prompted the British to lay stress on enforcement of hygiene in the city and suburbs. They laid the sewerage network, underground sewerage network in London. And Calcutta, then under British rule, Calcutta had also witnessed the laying of, I mean to say that sewerage network across the city, length and breadth of the city. And then they lay stress on the cleanliness drive. Disinfectants were sprayed across the city. And definitely they took all kind of hygiene measures along with this. But finally what happened, much before the vaccine came to the fore, the disease was controlled by the public health measures. So this is very important thing, that it changes the architecture, it changes the urban planning, it changes the health policy and all. This is what I'm talking of, outside world. And if you remember, and most of you will remember, during plague, Calcutta, Dr. Radha Govind Kaur, popularly known as Dr. R.G. Kaur, did a very commendable job, commendable work in the name of plague, and that book is now part of history. And besides, some of the persons, including Sister Nivedita, she also did a lot for cleaning his local areas and all. So that shows there is inculcation of sense of fraternity across the population. Asiatic cholera. Asiatic cholera was a deadly epidemic, very deadly epidemic, and that was controlled by public health measures. That was also controlled by that. It was so deadly a disease that, I mean, they didn't give time for the treatment. After giving, the doctors used to treat the patient with saline solution and all, but it could not be contained. It was so deadly a disease that in 1817 to 1857, during that period, absolutely, there is a great, I mean, only 6% of the British soldiers, they died battling the enemy, only 6%. Remaining 94% of the British soldiers, they died of cholera and other enteric fevers. That's why the head of public health department in those days, Sir James Ranald Martin, commented that the disease is the greatest enemy of the British soldiers. That's why the question of medical education in Calcutta, the capital of the then British India, came to the fore. Cholera resulted in setting up a medical school for native doctors in 1822. And then came Calcutta Medical College in 1835, the first medical college in Asia. So, changing the education policy also. Now, it is in this city that Robert Koch in 1884 could identify the bacteria causing cholera, bacillus. While physicians were combating the disease with saline solution, the public health and the hygiene measures were enforced. People were educated on the use of potassium permanganate in wells and ponds. They were educated on personal hygiene. Likewise, following malarial fever outbreak, the lack of proper drainage system was highlighted. They were educated on the personal hygiene as also the stoppage destroying the mosquito breeding larvae. Alongside the public health workers, alongside this, what happened? The health workers also met with the resistance. When they went to give the vaccine to a community for smallpox, they met with resistance. This is the behavior of the community. And this was a time when the First World War broke out. A section of physicians from Calcutta had gone to the Mesopotamia front and experienced at least 5 deadly diseases, including typhus. Human beings survive by fighting diseases. It is a natural instinct. Searching for a cure is a natural instinct to doctors. That's why Dr. Dwarikanath Ghoshal, a character in my novel, while in conversation with Dr. Pulin Chandra Bosu, his friend, on Koch's research on cholera comments, you know what, Bosja Moshai, now that the bacteria has been identified, its ability to do harm can also be prevented. Pulin said, perhaps, but do you think it will be easy? It may be difficult, but it will not be impossible. We could even find out that it is quite simple. For all that we know, the road lies just in front of us. It is just that we are not able to see it. Eminently possible, seconded Pulin. Not everyone dies when they get cholera. Some do survive. Of course. Dwarika, rubbing his chin, repeated himself a few moments later. Of course. Then Dr. Kritindranath Ghoshal, son of Dwarikanath, at the Mesopotamia front while battling for a typhus patient, murmurs, you may be attempting to draw the man into your kingdom, god of death, but I, the medical practitioner, am trying to pull him back towards life with all my weapons in my armory. You may be the king of realm of death, sir, but I too am no less a warrior from the kingdom of living. You may be more powerful than I am, but I'm a proud and obstinate soldier who will not concede defeat so easily. It was so interesting a time. It was so revealing a phase of human values and its subversion. I was tempted to write on it. When I'm saying subversion, I've used that in my novel, how the subversion happened. I'll come to that later. Another reason was, or a reason of writing this novel was, none of the writers in Bengal I know of wrote on the subject. You will find doctors in their novel as mere characters, just characters, but they have not dealt with the medical sciences and its relations to the societal development. Now, before advancing further, for those of you who have not yet read my book, let me give a synopsis of Ballad of Remittent Fever. Then it will be easier for you to question me also on the subject. The novel can be best described as a juxtaposition of a family saga of Ghoshal family with all human emotions and traits centered on Calcutta and their relentless pursuit of medical sciences to improve the quality of life. Set in the 19th and early 20th century, the novel gives you a glimpse of Calcutta and the manner of which the city was changing. While Kolkata was fast becoming a hub of migrants from other cities and towns, it had also become captive to many deadly diseases, captive to a host of diseases. At the center stage of the narrative are three doctors, Dwarikanath Ghoshal, 1860 to 1940, Pritindranath Ghoshal, 1893 to 1967, and Diyottam Ghoshal, born in 1946. And there is a fourth doctor of whom I'll talk later, a little later. These doctors, they fought against various diseases and social maladies. Dwarikanath had been disowned by his father Ramkanto for his desire, passionate desire to study medicine at Calcutta Medical College. As told you, set up in 1835. Sideline of this, those days, Calcutta Medical College certificate was equivalent to that of the graduation certificate of London University. Now people talk about Kadambini Ganguly. Kadambini Ganguly also got the Calcutta Medical College certificate. But when she got, Calcutta Medical College came under the purview of Calcutta University in 1857. But for 2 years or 3 years or so, two parallel systems ran. Calcutta Medical College used to give certificate. Power was vested with the superintendent. And Calcutta University degree, as usual, they used to give MB. But Kadambini Ganguly got the certificate of Calcutta Medical College. By virtue of that, it was equivalent to the London University degree, MB degree. Anyway, coming back to the subject, when Dwarikanath was disowned by his father, Dwarikanath had to leave his home with a very meager sum of money given to him by his aunt Sureshwari. He wanted to give some ornaments, gold ornaments, but Dwarika didn't take it. With that sum, Dwarika went to Calcutta Medical College, had his admission, paid admission fees and all. The kind of money he had is not much, and that amount is nothing. I mean, that was not great amount. He can survive at the most 1 or 2 days maximum. He was sitting outside the Calcutta Medical College, very sad. Then suddenly an Edward John Smith, a rich businessman of those days, he came out of the medical college and found that a very good boy, good looking boy, sitting outside the medical college on a ledge. He asked, "What happened to you, my boy? Why are you looking morose?" Then Dalika explained everything, just couldn't hold himself from weeping and all. Then Edward John Smith took Dalika to his home. And his home was Central District of Calcutta, Free School Street. In those days, it was called Kalinga areas, Kalinga, Kalinga. He used to stay there, and they didn't have any child. His wife's name was Rosemary Smith. The Smith couple groomed a teenager. And though they didn't pressurize him at all, Dalika embraced Christianity at his own will. And then he studied a lot, and thereafter Dalika, what happened? Then Dalika went to London for higher studies, securing MD degree. When he came back from London, he found that Mrs. Smith died of influenza, which was a raging fever in Calcutta that time. Then after the demise of Mrs. Smith, Mr. Smith decided to depart from Calcutta for good, and he gave some money and some kind of his belongings, including his phaeton to Dalika. Dalika, with that money and due to some of his earnings, meantime he started earning also with a little bit of practice. He set up his home in a plot of land in east part of Calcutta, which is Beliaghata. Those days, during his time, Beliaghata was a posh kind of area, like Newtown and Salt Lake now in Calcutta. Those days, that was a very good area. So he set up home there. And then he started practicing. Soon he became a very famous practitioner. He was very passionate about curing a patient and all. And he was very passionate of studying human being, studying the body of human being. He had a practice every day in the morning after his morning stroll. He had to dissect a dead body. Try to find out what happened, why the person was dead, just to make a post-mortem. And even in one morning stroll, when he saw any person, naked means upper body, bare person, he used to love watching the back muscles play, like trapezius, rhomboideus major, deltoids. He used to watch very keenly what is the setup of muscles and all. And Dalika was involved in the betterment of public health and stood against all kind of superstitions. From day one, he used to do that. Then Robert Koch, as I told you, Robert Koch was also then identified a cholera, Vibrio cholerae, the bacteria causing Asiatic cholera. So Dalika was very excited at the discovery. He started treating that time when he was practicing, then cholera was a very raging fever in Calcutta. And then he treated a good number of cholera patients, and some of them survived. A good number of patients survived also. He used to study why the patients are surviving and why are they dying. He couldn't make out. He used to treat the cholera patients with saline solution. Very thick needle. With that, he used to put saline injections, sometimes in the stomach, sometimes somewhere. That is the treatment prevalent in those days. Then one day, Dalika commented himself or murmured that maybe the medicine for cholera is around us, but we cannot identify it. But when we found the treatment of cholera only in the 1970-71, that URS was discovered only that time. So those days also people survive URS. That some people are surviving by having coconut water and all that he recorded. So he basically was laid trust on the community health while treating a patient, while treating a malarial fever patient. He used to ask the neighbors to clean the garbage, clean the vat, clean everything so that they cannot cause any larvae and all. Alongside the diseases, eternal love between couples had flowed on. An ardent music lover, Dwarika Nath, had married to the foster daughter of a dancing girl of Calcutta. She was a renowned dancing girl of Calcutta. Dwarika married to her foster daughter. He christened her as Amodini, who became the muse of Dwarika Nath. Earlier, he had a fling with a cholera patient named Amodini who had survived under his treatment. Perhaps that's why Dwarika had changed the name of Saraswati, the foster daughter, to Amodini. And then Dwarika, in association with his friend Gopal Chatterjee, is a real character, but Dwarika is absolutely is a fictitious character. Gopal Chatterjee had tried various vaccines, including pox and malaria, on a select community. And sometimes the results were satisfactory. Dwarika Nath had observed Calcutta was a unique city where an ovarian hysterectomy was juxtaposed with the cataract operation by couching on the wayside. In the town, alongside the modern medical practitioners, the quacks had also thrived. Kritindranath. Now coming to Kritindranath. Kritindranath, the son of Dwarika and Amodini, meritorious though, was a bit haywire type. He found pleasure in going against the set norms of the society. In his concluding years of studying medicine in Belgachia College, now it is named as R.G. Kaur Medical College, he had developed a deep sense of bonding with his cousin Madhumadhavi Ghoshal, 1897-1967, a student of Ayurveda and midwifery. Though the relationship was not at all platonic, yet it conveyed a sense of purity of nature. However, it was soon viewed as illicit by his father, the patriarch of the family, and everybody forced him to marry. Everybody forced him. So Dwarika, I'm talking of Kritindranath, had to marry as per the prevalent norms of the society. He married to Lavanyaprabha, 1898 born. Kritindra and Lavanya had a son, Punyendranath, 1913-1966. Punyendra was a chemistry professor, married to Indira. In 1966, Punyendra died of heart attack. But coming back to Kritindranath had joined the Bengal Ambulance Corps. Kritindra had joined the Bengal Ambulance Corps in the British India and went to the Mesopotamia front. During the First War, his son was then a toddler, just a toddler. At Mesopotamia, Kritindranath had felt the multi-dimensional impact of the war. It was not only usual injury and diseases like sandfly fever, like influenza, like tuberculosis, like typhus, but also psychological impact on the survivors too. For survival, some characters might stoop to the gutter and some touch the heaven. In fact, a little while ago I told you about Kritindranath challenging the god of death. While on one hand he is doing that, the other hand is thinking when this patient will die in that case, he will get his pair of shoes. Why? Because while moving here and there, Kritindo lost his shoes. And in that terrain, barefoot, walking barefoot there is absolutely as good as death. It's impossible in the morning sun, not even in the night. And army was very strict while issuing a pair of shoes. So one hand is fighting, he is just challenging the god of death. On the other hand, is thinking if the person dies, he will get the pair of shoes. This is a very interesting character, and this reflection come out at the time of crisis, as what I was telling before, just beginning of this theme. So there are a lot of this kind of contradictory behavior of human being which comes out on the open during the time of crisis, during the time of any under disease condition, under epidemics. Now on return from the front, Kritindranath had observed, and then I'm talking of the psychological impact. While returning home, Kritindra observed, in between while coming back home, the train stopped in a military halt. He got down from the train just for walking, just for relaxing. Then suddenly, and he's talking to the station master. Suddenly, he saw an old man, aged man, came and asked question to the station master. Mera ladka aaya? That means, has my son come? Without waiting for the answer, the person goes back. The session master told Kritindranath, look, this person every day at this time, the person would come and ask the same question, and without waiting for any answer, he will go back. This is the impact of war, and that was recorded. So the psychological impact also of the war is there in the story. So nowadays the psychiatry and the psychology has become very important subject, but I mentioned that in that period, and it is not a weird kind of thought. I've got a proof that happened that time. Because this novel is based on the foundation of truth, is not very weird kind of thinking. All the thing I'm talking of have the foundation of truth. On return from a front, Kritindranath had observed that their home, under the rule of his father, was running in the same disciplined way as it was before. The toddler, grown up to a loving child, Lavanya had turned a very good housewife, mother, that is Amodini, is busy as usual, and is a singer also. She sings. And Madhumadubhi has become, by this time, a very promising Ayurveda practitioner, and people come to him. She is also very busy in just practicing Ayurveda. Right from the morning, she is busy. Dwarikanath was busier than ever before, and Kritindranath felt claustrophobic at home. The principal reason was he couldn't forget Madhumadubhi, her soulmate, and he couldn't disown the overpowering attraction of Madhumadubhi. So Kritindranath left home on the sly, moved various parts of the country in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, so many places as a roving physician. And while as a roving physician, he treated a good number of patients, right from hysteria to leprosy to Kalajor and whatnot. So that is also shown in the travels of Kritindranath. One day he was back to Bengal, and by accident he met Madhumadubhi, and he eloped with Madhumadubhi to start a new life in Kuch Bihar, new conjugal life at Kuch Bihar, which was then a kingdom. And then later the couple shifted to Budgaon, which is a fictitious name again, in Darjeeling district, north of Bengal. From the tiny hamlet, a mountain range named Sleeping Buddha could be seen. It's like a sleeping Buddha, Buddha is sleeping. The couple became known as Master Babu and Didi Moni. Pritindra's grandson, Dijottam, an intern at Calcutta Medical College in 1966-1967, heard stories of his eccentric grandfather from his grandmother Labunaprabha. Perhaps he fostered a desire within him to meet him once, but none knew of his address, none knows whether they're alive. Even there is no photograph of Pritindranath at home, because after the departure of Pritindranath, an enraged Dwarika destroyed all the photographs of Pritindranath. There is no record of Pritindranath so that he can find out or identify that he is the person. And this Dwarika, while Dijottam sitting at emergency duty of medical college, thinking all this, and he treats the patient. He learns how to treat the patient. So through his eyes, we can get a picture of Calcutta, economic situation, social situation of Calcutta in 1966-67, and then the treatment procedure, how the how the treatments are done in a hypoglycemia patient, how he's treating. All these things were learned. That gives a fairly good idea of the treatment procedure in 1966, 1967. Even that is the time the ORS, the fundamental thing for the cholera treatment, is being discovered. So that also is there in his statement or talks, that is also there.
Ashok.
Yes.
Ashok, sorry to interrupt. Maybe we could wrap up in a few minutes and then open up the.
Just give me a minute. I'm wrapping it up. Just give me a minute.
No, take time.
On a certain political job, Dijottam had gone to Budgaon, and by chance he was he was made to stay with a couple, and Dijottam stayed, and the only thing Dijottam find out that this couple are more or less conversant with the medicine and the modern medicine and the treatment procedure also. That time he didn't lay much importance on it because he was in a hurry. Next day he came back to Calcutta. Coming back to Calcutta, Dijottam, so when pondering his thought, but while talking to this couple could discover that who Dijottam is. That Dijottam was their grandchild. They could discover, but they did not reveal their identity. But while coming back home, while discussing with his family and all, his friend, then he suddenly think he have to go another time once to Budgaon and try to locate who the couple really are. He went back, but he discovered that the day before the couple died of a landslide injury. And the villagers said that, look, they discovered two small peaks, and one person said, there lies our Master Babu and Didi Moni. One person chanted, long live Didi Moni, long live Master Babu. And entire villagers started join the chorus. And that's how a ballad was born. With this, may I request you to place your questions if you have.
You can type your questions in the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And Ashok, there is already one question here from Julie, Dr. Julie Banerjee Mehta. Can you read it? Then I won't. Or should I read it out?
No, I can read it. If you can read it out, please.
Yes, sure. In the Ballad of Remittent Fever, Calcutta is a character. In the first few minutes of your talk, you elucidate acutely and adeptly the evolution of the city and how, with public health measures put into drive, Calcutta begins to evolve. This fascinates the reader, and it draws the critical reader to the historicism, the lived experience of what Governor Cuomo in New York City has been waging. Kafka's novel, The Plague, and Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude is in sync with your remarkable novel. How do you configure the body of the city with the body of the many dead?
Again, body of the city with?
How do you configure the body of the city with the body of the many dead? How do you see the form of Calcutta changing as so many people died? I guess that's the question, Julie, isn't it? Yes.
Died means those days or now?
Let me unmute Julie, and she can ask the question of herself. Julie, can you unmute? Yes. No, you still have to unmute. Yes, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Sharajesh. Perfectly read better than I could read it. I'm trying to ask Ashok, if you can see if you can configure. In your novel, Calcutta has become a persona. It is a character. You know, you adeptly make Calcutta into a living organism.
Yes.
And you use words such as subversion, and you use Calcutta as standing up, resisting. So it is an active body.
Yes.
Now, when you talk about the death of the many, when you talk about pandemic deaths, which came to about 1 million or so, how in your mind as a writer do you place the body of the nation, body of the city, in juxtaposition with the millions dead?
Yeah, but when some deaths happen in any epidemic, for that matter, epidemics cause death. That happened in Spanish flu also in 1918, 1920. It happened in Calcutta also. In fact, Spanish flu is a flu which attacked Alaska also. And the 5 million population of the world had gone down those days. 5 million, 5% I'm talking of. 5% of the world population gone down in 1918, 1920. But thing is this, when the deaths happen, as I told you, that the doctors quest for the solution, quest for the cure. As I told you that in the voice of Pritindranath, that he is challenging the god of death. So likewise, doctors' pursuit is for that, giving a cure. So that will be there. We are fighting the disease since prehistoric days. And so by fighting this, we have attained, if you see the average age, average longevity has gone up because of doctors, because of their lifestyle, it changes. So the contribution of doctor has to be acknowledged. And Calcutta is a living character where this kind of things are happening. Calcutta is a vibrant city, people are like this, and the changing of the Calcutta population and changing of the attitude of Calcuttans that I've tried to record during that period of 1867 to 1967. I can't hear you, Sharajesh. Sharajesh,
Sorry,
I can.
sorry, I muted myself by mistake. Do you have a copy of your book? Mr. Subroto Mitra would like to see a copy if you can show it.
On the camera?
Yes.
Okay, just one second.
Anybody else, if you have any questions, please type in the chat box.
This is the book. Can you see that, Sharajesh?
Yes, everyone can. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. but there doesn't seem to be any more questions. It's been a very entertaining evening. Well, entertaining is probably the wrong choice of words. It's been a very reflective evening. We've come to know quite a bit. Thank you very much, Ashok, for taking the trouble to speak to us for as long as you have. And we thank the audience for also attending. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Sarojas. Good night and namaskar.